Welcome to Inside with Savvy and Sage. I'm Rob Brinkman, my partner Chad Tongo. Chad, have you ever considered owning an electrical vehicle?
I must say a handful of times, but I've never had the courage to get one.
Courage?
hmm
Why do you use that term?
I like driving, and I don't like the thought of running out of juice.
So you're one of those people that, see, as soon as I get to a quarter tank of gas, I fill it up, right? Or you're one of those people, I can get by. That alert telling me I'm on fumes, I still have more. That's you?
I, I've let's just say I've ran out of gas a couple of times in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. For me,
But
I like, yeah,
I
I
should
like the
consider
sound.
like a cyber truck. You
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that that looks like an amazing vehicle.
Well, back a buddy of mine, I'm going to play golf with him very shortly, as soon as we get done with this. His Cybertruck's being delivered, I think, tomorrow, and
Amazing.
he's not quite sure if he wants to keep it. And he says he can sell it more. He can sell it for more than what he paid for it.
Well, if it were to have been, you could sell it for less for what he paid for. I'd say let's wrap that up with VHQ type of logo and Inside Savings. Be perfect marketing tool.
Yeah,
You could drive it.
yeah. I don't know. I looked at the EVs for my wife. She likes the SUV type. We looked at the Tesla, but it would look like a big Volkswagen bubble. It felt like it's like you were in an aquarium, right? It was kind of unnerving.
But here's the upside. You could literally put it on self-driving mode and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I kind of like driving. I like starting my car. I like hearing that particular,
V8.
yeah, the Ferrari
Yeah,
V8, the
yeah,
roar. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. Okay, all right. So our guest is an expert in all this, and she has some really cool insight. I've been looking forward to this
Ooh,
ever since Xander queued it up. So let's bring on Elaina Farnsworth, who is the founder and CEO of SkillFusion.
awesome.
Elaina Farnsworth, CEO, founder of SkillFusion, welcome. We are excited to hear about some of the perspectives you provide, not only in the EV world, the hybrid world, which I know we're going to talk on, but also being a woman in technology. But first, tell us what SkillFusion does.
SkillFusion is a software platform, and our mission is to make the infrastructure for electric vehicles accessible by providing workers to do so. So, how do we get more people trained in the right way to be able to support the current infrastructure and the future infrastructure that we're going to need to power electric vehicles?
Right. So infrastructure, right? So this is
Yes.
kind of the hot topic, right? Supply, demand. Um, so one of the things that you have a really, I think, interesting position on is this position of choice. So articulate when you look at the EV world, you're a promoter of choice. What do you mean by that?
So, one of the things that I think is a big misconception is that EVs are being shoved down people's throat. And in any case of new technology, which is where I have spent most of my career, change is hard. And when you have any change, whether that's a new phone or a new computer or a new type of vehicle, change takes some work. I am an advocate of, if you want an electric vehicle, you should be able to own one. And if you don't, you shouldn't be forced to own one, but the ability for you to have one is your choice.
Yeah.
Now, I am going to say this just a second, and I know a lot of people are thinking, what does that mean? In order to have an EV, you have to have a place to charge them.
Yeah.
And so to have that equal opportunity, whether you live in an urban area or whether you live in a rural area, to be able to charge a vehicle, and that is the only way that you can have EV ownership.
Yeah.
So that's rather exciting, Elaine, and what you guys have come out to obviously be in the mission towards. And so a big part of what you guys do is upskilling. Is that correct? And so if you could elaborate a little bit on, what are some headwinds or challenges that you guys are facing with regards to upskilling, and then I think more importantly, the successes that you've seen thus far?
This is one of my favorite questions, Chad. I am very passionate about this because,
That's why he's savvy, by the way. He always asks
oh, yeah,
these really super insightful. It's annoying. It's annoying to me, but he asks these super insightful questions. So.
that's right. Well, and this is my passion. This is why I am the co-founder, is because my mission over the last 20 years has been, how do we teach people to get into these emerging markets? You don't wake up one day and just think, oh, hey, how do I get into the world of EV? Many people
Yeah.
don't think that way.
Yeah.
And I'd love to give you a story, a success story from a community. When you think about EVs, many people think, well, I have to be an electrician to work on them, to do installations, to do maintenance, to do operations. Absolutely, yes, there is a lot of opportunity to upskill and become electricians. And that is required to do many of the installs and the work of the higher level chargers, the level 3s and beyond. You must be an electrician. However, there are a lot of jobs that are required knowledge that's not that complex, or that is, you need training and you need upskilling, but you don't have to be a journeyman electrician.
Yeah.
So yeah, you see, so you need people that can sell. You need software, because it's a complex stack of computers. When you look at the EV charging infrastructure, you have to have communication. So the chargers have to talk to something. It has to be connected to the internet. You have to have software that runs the payments, or that actually tells you how much energy is going into the cars. You have to have visual inspections. So if there's a hurricane, for instance, there's a tree that fell on a charging station, someone needs to be able to say, oh, we see that this is offline, but there's a tree that's on the charging station. So that is something that certainly is a skill that people can have and go down a pathway of electrician or not. This is an upskilling that we're really advocates of. How do you get into that pathway? I'd like to share the journey, Chad. So we did a project in California, and there's a lot of need for people that are transitioning into new career paths, but there's also a lot of opportunity for young people. So in one of our California projects, and I talk about this a lot, we worked with a nonprofit in San Bernardino called Uplift San Bernardino, and they go into communities, and specifically this one is in San Bernardino, and they help uplift that community to understand more opportunities that are there for them. And we partnered with a high school and with the nonprofit, and we went in and said, how many of you know what's going on with electric vehicle, or have you heard of one? When we first entered that high school, you said, do you know what a Tesla is? And they all raised their hand, but they didn't know very much more than that. And we went through a year-long program where we took these young men and women and we said, what is it that you would like to do in electric vehicle? And we gave them a whole training around what are all the careers, from being a mechanic in electric vehicle, because that's way different than if you're going to be an installer. Yeah. And it's way different than being a mechanic on a combustion engine on an ICE vehicle. It's not even the same thing. So as we were really talking to those students and we saw light bulbs go off in their minds, they really began to engage with their town, with their community. And so we taught them things like, there are lots of incentives that are coming from the federal government. We taught the kids what those incentives were. And then they went out and they talked to their parents and their grandparents. And they said, did you know you can get a rebate for turning in your ICE vehicle and turning it into an electric vehicle? And here are the forms that you need to fill out. And here's how you do that.
That's awesome.
So they start talking to their parents about, how do you get a new car? And the parents are thinking, well, this is not an option for me, but Uplift San Bernardino saying, yes, it is. So you start to engage these students into a world they never knew existed. Some of the students chose the path of, like I said, the EV vehicle side, where others, we went into their area. We hired electricians that came from some of the local unions. And we let the students do walkthroughs on when they were doing a site survey. So how do you go in and even find out where to put these things? What are the power requirements when they hook to the grid? what is this going to be pulling, when they are um, in this area? Are people going to be able to charge for 30 minutes?
Mm.
Because it's not like a gas station, right? It takes
Yeah.
a lot longer. So, with all of that said, we open their eyes to opportunities. And many of these students have now chosen a new pathway for their career because they were educated on what are their possibilities. And so, those are some of the stories that we love to really tell, because it was a story of success, not only for those kids, but also for their community.
Yeah, that's incredibly fascinating. Because Rob and I are in emerging technology as
Yep.
well, and for us, a big conversation that we have internally, and it's an ongoing dialogue, is as the world, even macroeconomically, shifts towards adopting new technologies, the workforce also needs to be able to move alongside it, and
Yes.
there's just such a big chasm right now of skill and trade that's necessary in order for a society to continuously thrive in this emerging technology world. Right, everything is going so rapidly, growing so rapidly that you know I'd say marginalized communities can suffer significantly if we don't have people like yourself in your firm who's willing to go in there, partner with nonprofits, public private partnerships are going to be critical to ensuring that the workforce remains at least on par with where our technology is going.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
And Chad, I'd love to kind of pick your brain a little bit too, because think about it. When we say emerging tech, immediately, I don't know if you have this in a lot of your conversations, but immediately it goes to, oh, I've got to be a computer scientist. Do you find that? Because a lot of times we hear that, I got to be an electrician, I have to be a computer scientist. But really, there's so much more involved. There's skilled trades. There's people that have to actually, you know, go into the community and do the installs and do the groundwork and do the maintenance. And then there's the sales, and then there's the training side. There's so many opportunities that I think when we talk about emerging tech, a lot of times our recruitment efforts get lost because there's a misconception of what you have to do to get in the market.
Yeah, well, just to be fair, Chad may not be the best person to answer because he's already enrolled his 5-year-old in robotics class. I mean, he doesn't even let his son Luke eat dinner unless he can build a robot to, carry the food from the kitchen to the dinner table, right? But no,
Yeah.
Chad, do you want to respond to that? Sorry.
No, absolutely no. Rob's absolutely spot on. But look,
Yeah.
the way I see it, right, and just again, macroeconomics of emerging technology, there are still infrastructure needs that need to be addressed. And so I think ultimately the trades are going to need to be upskilled significantly because it's going to be different from, just kind of the hand and hammer type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have robots involved in the next, 5 to 10 years. How are we going to collaborate and interact as humans to be able to ensure that our productivity remains at an optimal level? So
Yeah,
there,
and in that context, and you also build on this because it's something that there's a lot of frustration. You
yeah,
said the key word there, Chad, trades, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of frustration with parents spending a fortune sending their kids to university
yeah,
to graduate with, you know, liberal arts
liberal
in,
arts.
in medieval French art. I mean, come on, right? So the point is, it's not all just, you're right, engineering, super technical stuff. There's all these ancillary things, but I think that parents, getting back to what you're saying, these students went home to their parents. I mean, I've been telling parents for the past half decade, unless your child is going into something specific, such as medicine or law or engineering or accounting, that they should just start off at a community college, because the first year or two is just redo what they learned in high school. And why spend the 30, 40,000? That just doesn't make sense, right? For the parents that they can't afford it, right? So continue on. I wanted to feel like I was part of the conversation.
Well, you're the center of it,
Yeah.
Rob. So no, I definitely. So I agree with that, Rob. But even we had our last guest, right? I mean, he's democratizing law as
Yeah.
it is, right? He has moved the need for brick and mortar lawyer interaction to now simply a software as a service. So I think, to your point though, Rob, I think that there's got to be a point where there's a bifurcation in a way where, these are the high skilled positions, and you go to trade school for those high skilled positions.
Yes.
We just completely eradicate the need for gen ed, right? I mean, you do that through high school in the first place. So if you're going to go and write code, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer, go straight into those respective quote unquote trades, right? And I hate using the word trades, but they're really professional trades.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the rest, yeah, let's continue to train somehow to ensure that the infrastructure, is at par with where we're going. So,
Well, I think we could have 2 or 3 segments on this topic. But because both of you are correct. We do need those engineers. We do need computer scientists. That's a no-brainer. But I want to give you some statistics and some numbers. A young person that I have 2 children, and I did the same thing. I put both of them in robotics when they could walk, and they were.
see, not weird, Rob.
Yeah, no, you're not.
You are
But
weird, Chad.
I
You
had
are weird, just not in this particular way.
Well, I'm weird, Chad. But one of them loved it. She says, "This is great. This is my thing." And my son, that just wasn't his thing. And what I have seen globally, particularly here in the U.S., is that the opportunities abound, whether you do want to go into the computer science or whether you do want to go into the trades, because you can get out with a skilled trade. And you've gone to college, you've gone through a program that many times is paid for by the people that you're working. If you go into organized labor or a union, you can get your apprenticeship paid for almost immediately by your employer at the other end. But even if you paid for it yourself, and even if you get out with some of those skilled trades that are, again, a professional trade, you're making $90,000 a year. You're making $100,000 in a couple of years where you had very little to no debt, which is the antithesis of if you go to a 4-year university, which again, we do need. I don't want to belittle the fact that we do need more engineers, and we do need more of that type of individual that is going to have those skills. But yet it's better to really know that you're going to get the value that you paid for that 4-year degree, if that's what you want to do, as opposed to, let's just try 4-year degree. It's not $10,000 to just try it anymore. It's a significant time and investment of money to get those degrees, but we need both. We need both, and $90,000 getting out with a trade isn't something that is just something to laugh at. So I want to encourage individuals, follow your passions and do what you need intentionally and thoughtfully to be able to work in this emerging space. I mean, there's a lot of jobs.
Yeah. So let's keep on the youth theme, but pivot it over to the consumption side, right?
Sure.
So, and especially it's an interesting context that I think you should share some further insight beyond the headline about what Ford announced yesterday about pulling back on EV stuff, right? Because there's some consumer stuff that I think you'll be able to gain some insight. But Chad and I make these super high fidelity 3D virtual environments, and we're having conversations with very large banking institutions, because I go into a brick and mortar bank because I'm old, right? But when I go in there, I don't see anybody under the age of 40. They're just not there. And banks are recognizing that, and they realize that unless they connect with these Gen Z and millennials, 20 years from now, nobody's going to be walking into their brick and mortar buildings. And so how do they get in touch with them? And so we're actually going to be building these virtual environments for commerce and engagement for these banking institutions. So when you hear that in the context of the youth and younger people in general and the EVs, what are the statistics telling you for SkillFusion, but also how does that help in the context of the headline Ford gave about adjusting their future EV production?
Sure. You're 100% right. And, I often use the analogy, and I talk to the digital natives and the digital immigrants. I hate to say it, but we're digital immigrants. we came up in a world where we had a lot less technology than the kids that are coming up today.
Mm.
When
Yeah.
you think about, you know, as we said, the 18 to 20 year olds and even younger, they were born in a time where the phone was their outlet.
Yep.
The technologies
Yeah.
in the computer is where they live. And Chad, you know, you've got a certain bit of that, in that you were exposed to technology very early on, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and you loved it. But
Pagers that didn't work.
yeah,
That was my first interaction with technology, and
pager.
big, cell phone bricks.
Yes, but
Yeah.
they were still cell phones. I mean,
Correct.
if you know,
Correct.
but we had to learn to adjust our lifestyle to the technology, whereas the digital natives, which are the younger generations now, the millennials, as you said, and beyond and below, they came into this world knowing exactly how to use and leverage, and one, feel very comfortable there. Whereas many times, unfortunately or fortunately, when we train and when we go into some of these programs, we have to train soft skills, because they are so intentional and doing everything with a computer. Many times talking to a person is more difficult for them because they're used to using
Yeah.
that technology.
Oh.
So, with all of that moving into the opportunity for skill fusion, when we're seeing the statistics of the automotives and these headlines pulling back, I want us to really think about what that means. We are headquartered in Detroit, which a lot of the automotives have a very strong presence in this region. And when you look at how automotive manufacturers run, they don't build cars today to sell tomorrow. These are lines that the cars will be coming out in 4 to 5 years. So they're really looking at the market and how can they produce the vehicles in 4 to 5 years. So when we look at retooling and we see pullback in the headlines, we have to remember the last 5 years for EVs, we have seen substantial growth. So it's been a hockey stick.
Mm.
We've seen going from one to doubling again, and the growth has gone like this, and then it's gone up. You can't continue that in the market forever. So even though we see some of the automakers saying we may not be producing as many, they're also investing in hybrid, which is gas and electric vehicle.
Right.
So we really have to look into exactly what these headlines mean. We are still producing a lot of electric vehicles. We are still seeing growth. It has not stopped growing. It is a new technology. And the statistics show that the 18 to 25 year olds are really asking more for these greener electric technologies than the people that are, let's say, my age and above. And as an auto manufacturer, they also think about who's going to be buying my cars in future years. Well, the 18 and 25 year olds, they are going to have and below more buying time than someone that might be in their 50s or 60s. So let's really look at that. And we are seeing positivity in the fact that young people want EVs. They want that technology, they want that experience, and they do want to buy those cars.
Sorry for the interruption, but this is our shameless plug that if you like the content, like the interviews, please subscribe. And what else should people do, Chad?
Thumbs up, like, and share on all your social media platforms what we do here.
That was really good visual. People are going to be very impressed with how you coordinated your hands with your mouth. That's great.
Thank you. Hand-mouth coordination.
All right. So to that point, you have the auto industry that does look longer term
Yeah.
and supply and demand. But one thing we can point to today, as far as a lack of supply, is charging stations, right? So what do you see? So one of the things I'm curious about, for instance, I just had breakfast this morning with a guy who mentioned that the city of Dallas, it was proposed to add 6 more city buses run purely on electricity, and the city's like, "What are you kidding? I mean, how are we going to how are we going to find the energy to charge those things? I mean, one of the things I'm curious about, because Chad and I actually have friends and investors that are into the solar panel charging stations. So can you kind of give us a landscape, what you see there, what's going on? Is there hope for the supply to catch up with the demand?
Yes, there's hope. I am going to be the hopeful optimist here, but I am going to give a realistic picture of where we are, which is scary.
Yeah.
I like to scare you first, and then I like to
Yeah.
give you hope.
Yeah.
So, my co-founder Rue Phillips and I, we have this discussion a lot. He's been in the electric vehicle industry, charging industry specifically, and solar for the last 30 years. I wanted to bring him up because he does another podcast where he asks CEOs of charging station manufacturers, hey, what is the uptime really? Because I can't tell you the number of friends, and in my own experience, I'll drive up to a charging station thinking that it's working and it's not functioning.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at right now, the scary side is we're really looking at 60% of these charging stations are functional. So that means 40% of them are not.
Wow.
Now, again, we are looking at some legacy systems, most legacy systems here. So the hope is coming in a few minutes. We have to get to, as a nation, 97% uptime. And that may sound like a lot, but it's really not. When you think about gas stations, the oil and gas industry has a 99+% uptime. So if you look at 97%, we're really getting off easy. But when you think about we're at 60% and we have to get to 97%, there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That is, again, one of SkillFusion's mission. And where I'm going to come into the hopeful side is this. Because I love to say this, Tesla did a great model. If you remember, Tesla, they put their charging stations out first. And guess what?
Yep.
Their charging stations work most of the time.
Yep.
And now we have a commitment from all the manufacturers that our chargers will also work. So we've got commitment. We have people that are willing to put the skin in the game and say, all right, I'm going to do this. There has been billions of dollars in the past 5 years, specifically from the administration, put into funds to allow communities and states. There are federal funds, but many of them run through the states. There's a fund called NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund. And the federal government is giving money to places like Dallas and states to not only fix charging stations that are already there, but also install new charging stations. So that's hopeful. Every plan in the United States, and we're talking specifically to the US right now, every state, in the United States has a plan. So we're going to start seeing more charging stations, and that's great. To address your concern about the power, we have a lot of really smart folks and nonprofits that are looking at this right now. There is a wonderful organization called EPRI. I'm not sure if you know them, but they're the Electric Power Research Institute. And they're currently working with all the utilities, and they have very strong supporters. They have free tools that are available right now on their website where you can go in and you can see the saturation now and then what the grid is going to be able to hold in the future. So you can already start to see, which this didn't, again, this took collaboration for profits and nonprofits and public-private partnerships to say, where is our energy today? Where do we need it to be tomorrow as we introduce these new electric technologies, not only vehicles, but beyond, because you just talked about fleets. How do we look at the grid and be proactive instead of reactive? And then where can we strategically align our investments in things like solar and battery energy storage to be able to have the opportunity, one, for us to manage the energy that we need, but also potentially give back to the grid. So we have significant investments right now with energy that can be stored in vehicles and be given back to the grid. These are things we can do today, but we have to be intentional. So the long answer to that was we have the energy. We just have to be intentional the way that we use it. And we use multiple energy sources like solar, battery energy storage, obviously traditional grid, but there is hope and there is opportunity.
Yeah. So Chad, question for you. A lot of that, Elena's answer was from the government side. On the private side, what is the appetite for investing? For instance, we have friends that do this. in the solar powered station? Is the private equity money, is the VC money, is Wall Street money, is it enthusiastic about this channel?
So I think it goes back to what Elaina alluded to regarding supply and demand. A lot of the misconception comes from, look, manufacturers are pulling back on electric, manufacturing altogether, but we do overlook the hybrid systems, which are also in need of charging stations. So in our most recent interactions with private capital markets, at least, there is still, I'd say, optimistic sentiment with regards to funding projects that involve solar, powered charging stations. They are still, I'd say, bullish with regards to the necessity to fill in the gap, right, with the infrastructure that's needed in our nation, and even some of them are moving towards India, moving towards the larger markets, Russia particularly as well. So it'll be interesting to see, how it all plays out, depending on who ends up at the White House or in the White House this November. And Rob, we talk with these guys all the time. I think it's gonna depend a lot on policies, right? Elaina alluded to, I think it was about $5 billion that were allocated to electrification.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, and this is just kind of my take from our conversations recently as well. They have not seen a lot of movement or product that's actually transpired out of the $5 billion. So hopefully something good comes out of that, and there's a lot more efficiency that we need to see with regards to our tax dollars.
Workers. All right.
All right, Chad, that makes sense. So, Elaina, on the investment side, what's your perspective on that?
I want to talk a little bit about private investment too, because we are seeing investments not only on the public side, but also the private sector. When you have very large organizations like Amazon that are committing to make their fleet electric, this is a global movement that's occurring, and the investments are coming from both sides. So I see that there's a faster adjustment that's being made on the private side, and the investments that are being made. Again, we're looking at this from a global eye, because if you look at other countries like Norway, who's making significant investments, and yeah, it's a smaller country, but I mean, they've gone 85% electric. We're looking at investments globally, China, Japan, Europe. We can't turn away from the fact that to remain relevant, we have to make the investments in these technologies, because it's a global movement, not just something that we're talking about here today in the US.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Elaine, it's interesting. So I'll tell a quick story. I was an executive of a pretty large institution that was founded out of Scandinavia. And in 2001, a group of us, we were in Stockholm for meetings, and we're in a break, and we're all sitting. It was a beautiful day, sitting outside a little table. And this guy walks up with this Nokia or Ericsson phone and points to this vending machine, and out drops a Coke. And I'm like, with the people at the table, I'm like, did you see that guy? He just pointed his phone at the machine and got a Coke. And so I was completely fascinated by this. So obviously, the Nordic countries specifically were way ahead of the United States in cellular technology. And so when I came back, I called some buddies of mine on Wall Street and said, please explain why I can't do this here. And they're like, it's really simple, right? And it gets back to your point about the car manufacturers looking at the long term. You had the communication companies had spent billions of dollars laying all of this hard cable in the ground. And guess what? It wasn't paid for yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't going to take on a new project of mobile until the old project was paid for, right? And so, this is one of those interesting aspects of how business functions, right? And I think this probably ties to as well, you mentioned about these early EV charging stations they're legacy stations, right? Which means they were cutting edge technology at the time, but now they're old and they're clunky and they need to be replaced. But there's probably an element of timing where whoever financed those is saying, well, we can replace them when I get my money back for actually installing those things, right? So anyway, okay, so to land the plane here, back to SkillFusion and looking at this industry beyond just the super high skilled engineers. There's also an element that you're passionate about, and that is women in technology. You're a CEO, you're a founder. So speak about that a little bit, Elaina.
Yes. Well, one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this industry specifically is there's a lot of opportunity for growth. And whenever you're seeing the numbers that we're seeing, I mean, we're seeing that we need another 80,000 electricians per year to be able to resolve some of the issues that we're talking about here. And to your point, Rob, the infrastructure, we have to lay the infrastructure in order for us to even have a potential to be relevant worldwide, globally. So as a young woman in technology, I came through, and I like to laugh and say decades ago, I was cool before technology was cool because I was one of the only females in my graduate studies in computer science. Because back then, I had to laugh. My mom didn't even think that I was going to be a good in computers because it was just a big game, right? This was back in the 90s. So it's one of these where the perception was, oh, and now we know how much technology means to the world. So when I look at this industry, it's equal opportunity. So there is opportunity for people of any background, of any area, of, for young women that are interested in pursuing these careers because there's such a gap in the skills that we need in order for the work that we need to have done. You can take a few more risks here and you can ask for help in an environment where you can say, I really don't know exactly what I want to do, but I know this technology and vehicle electrification excites me. And so as someone that, as a young woman, to be able to look at others, I don't know if you two remember that there was a show once called The X-Files. Do you remember that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And Chad, just so you know, X Files does not mean Twitter X. It's something.
Oh my
that's
God.
right.
You're
That's right. Well,
killing me.
exactly. And I'm showing my age.
I am totally not that young. Absolutely remember X-Files.
Well, listen, do you know why that was such a unique? Have you heard the story of why that was so unique?
No.
Because Agent Scully was the first female engineer that was put on television back in that time, where before the engineers and the people that were making the decisions historically weren't female. So there's an entire phenomenon called the Scully effect, and you can read about it. It's quite fun, where young women were asked that were in engineering and FBI capacity, and they started to see the surge, and they were asked and polled and said, why did you choose this field? And it was because they saw someone like themselves, a young woman that was on television doing things that in the past were never really thought to be in our future. So that's what excites me about the equal opportunity for people of color and for young women and all people. We have the chance to show that anybody can work in this industry, and we have a chance to highlight them. And then if they get the proper training, not a 4-year degree, some of them, yes, but others, no, they will have the ability to scale in an industry that's just going to continue to grow. And we can start a movement where people begin to help others. No matter what the challenges are in your past, you can have a future. And that's what that's actually our tagline, is the fusion of skill with opportunity. And that's really what we believe in.
Yeah. Well,
Nice.
Elaina Farnsworth, you're a tremendous ambassador, not only for women in technology, but also this not only emerging but perpetual technology in EVs. So we thank you for your time. We'll look forward to bringing you back on because I know there's a lot of things we didn't get a chance to touch on, and we'd love to hear your insights. So thank you again.